a completely botched withdrawal in Afghanistan. We have Americans stranded. We have American allies being butchered by the Taliban. What exactly is going to be done about it? And what do we learn overall from this entire experience in Afghanistan? What should it mean for us as a nation, as a military? What should we expect to learn from this so that we don't repeat some of the same mistakes that we're seeing materializing here that have hurt our soldiers, our allies, and overall the U.S. reputation? We're going to be talking about that here on Making the Argument with Nick Freitas, where we make the arguments to help defend a free society. Okay, before we go into all the specifics, I want to share a story very, very quickly. And this was a meeting I was at very recently. And at this meeting, we had a wide array of people with different subject matter expertise that is relevant to Afghanistan. We had special operations forces from 3 different countries represented. We had people that had worked in the State Department. We had people that had worked in missionary work, in aid work, etc. You name it. We had a wide array of people there with a wide array of experience, all discussing what was currently going on in Afghanistan. And it didn't go down exactly the way you might think it would. Because obviously when you have people with that sort of subject matter expertise, with that sort of experience, either on the ground in places like Iraq or Afghanistan and other areas around the world, you would expect kind of more of an in-depth talk about foreign policy or maybe defense strategy. And some of that was discussed, but I want to really emphasize something here because it's going to inform why I'm talking about the rest of this, what's going on in Afghanistan. I want you to understand the lens of which I'm trying to view this, because it's become very, very easy to oversimplify anything and to simply point blame, right? There's no shortage of political hay to be made. But what I saw is the predominant concern of the people in that room who had served in Afghanistan. And again, I served in Iraq. I didn't serve in Afghanistan. But as the people that served in Afghanistan, that had family in Afghanistan, that had friends in Afghanistan, their primary concern at this point was not whether or not we should stay in Afghanistan or leave in Afghanistan. It was really about how we left and what essentially is happening, not only to U.S. personnel on the ground, whether they be defense, State Department, press, contractors, but also the friends that they had made in Afghanistan, the people they had worked with, the people that had sacrificed and believed in the promise that the United States was making and decided to fight alongside us against a very, very brutal enemy in the form of the Taliban, as well as terrorist organizations that were operating in Afghanistan now, and now have woken up to find themselves very, very suddenly in a position where their entire lives and the lives of their families are at risk. And we had one individual in particular share a story, one of triumph, one of tragedy. The triumph one was they had worked. Paperwork had been denied 2 separate times for an individual that they had worked with in Afghanistan. It was finally approved and they were able to get out of country. And no sooner had he learned about that than he learned about another friend of his who his wife, his children were stopped at a checkpoint and they were murdered. And that's the reality right now. That's the reality on the ground in Afghanistan. And as we talk about the grand strategy involved, and I think that's important, it's always important to take a step back and look at these things strategically and realistically. But if you do so while at the same time completely forgetting the humanity involved, and that ultimately U.S. foreign policy is about American interests, but it is also about ensuring that American honor is intact, because I believe, as quaint as some people want to suggest that it is, honor is integral to American policy and American interests. And if you're going to make certain commitments, it is very important to stand by those commitments to people. And I don't see that being done right now. But I think it's important that we remember that what we are talking about here is not just political implications, defense implications, strategic implications. Ultimately, this does come down to how this is affecting people on the ground. So let's go ahead and get into this discussion. The first thing we're going to talk about today is going to be the withdrawal. Now, I want to emphasize something here. That's not all we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how did we get into Afghanistan? Why did the objectives change over time? What were some positive effects of us being there? What were some negative effects? And most importantly, what should we learn going forward? What should we understand about not only American military power and American foreign policy, but what should we understand about us as a culture which informs that policy and those military decisions? Because we see the change over time and how it affects U.S. military policy and how U.S. military policy affects other people that we're engaging with. And it's really important that we ask some of these fundamental questions. But I know everyone right now is focused on the withdrawal, and for good reason, because that's the one thing we're going to talk about today that we could actually affect a change on immediately, and one needs to be affected. So let's talk about it.